This is Saturn Girl. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. Comment below because I want to know what you think and it helps me out with the algorithm. But anyway, it feels like I've been talking a lot about retrogrades lately. My mama Venus was retrograde. Then she went direct. Mercury went retrograde. And now Jupiter went retrograde as of today, September 4th. I meant to make this video a long time ago, but I was having emotional issues, so I didn't do it. And now we're doing it now. But Jupiter will be retrograde for a little while here, so this will be relevant for a little while. But what does this mean? What does it mean for you, for me, for us? Well, let's take a look. So anyway, you've probably watched my other videos, so hopefully you know what retrogrades are, but we'll still review a little bit quick. Retrograde motion is apparent motion. It's when a planet appears to move backwards through the zodiac as seen from Earth. You have to observe this phenomenon over multiple days, right? Because planets still rise and set in the same direction. However, when viewed from Earth over multiple days, it looks like they move backwards through the zodiac. So what happens with a superior planet like Jupiter, and a superior planet is one that is further from the sun than Earth. So with a superior planet like Jupiter, here, let's say, I hate doing this with the balls. Let's say this is the Earth. And let's say this is Jupiter. So Jupiter orbits very slow. Very slow. But as the Earth, right, the Earth moves faster than Jupiter. It's closer to the sun. So as the Earth, it's hard. Everything's reversed in the camera. So as the Earth approaches Jupiter, right, in terms of its orbit, and begins to overtake it, Jupiter will appear to move backwards as seen from Earth. As the Earth overtakes Jupiter and passes it, then Jupiter appears to go direct once again, right? So anyway, this is all based on Jupiter's synodic cycle, right? Which means Jupiter's position relative to the sun. We always start with conjunctions. Now let's say this is Jupiter, right? Jupiter and the sun conjunct. And then, then the whole cycle goes through again. So similar to Venus, right? We start with the conjunction to the sun in terms of the Jupiter cycle. As Jupiter separates from the sun by at least 15 degrees, right? Because within 15 degrees, objects aren't visible. The sun's light eclipses them. So once he separates at least 15 degrees from the sun, he becomes visible. And this is, again, to the east of the sun, right? So he becomes visible as the morning star, rising before the sun. As Jupiter reaches a trine to the sun, which is about 120 degrees, he stations retrograde. When he reaches the opposition to the sun, he's always retrograde. So if Jupiter is opposite the sun, he will always be retrograde. If you have Jupiter opposite the sun in your chart, like I do, Jupiter is retrograde. You understand? Oh, gosh, this ball burst. And it's all that stuff. Blah. It's probably poison, isn't it? They have squishy poison in these balls. I'm just going to stick with my 8-ball now. Anyway, so as Jupiter reaches the opposition, he's always retrograde. And then Jupiter reaches a trine again, but this time to the other direction of the sun. So this time he's 120 degrees away, but to the west, right? Excuse me. And this begins his evening star phase, when he's visible just after the sun sets. And then he approaches the conjunction with the sun once again, right? Now, Jupiter goes retrograde about every 13 months, so a little bit more than a year, and for about 4 months. So Jupiter goes retrograde here, September, October, November, December. So that means Jupiter retrograde is going to happen between now and December. Actually, Jupiter will go direct on New Year's Eve, apparently, December 31st of this year. The final day. So hopefully this is a good omen for the next year, you know? So now, but what does this mean? Well, number one, what is Jupiter? He's our Lord of benevolence, of abundance. He's teaching philosophy, religion, honors, good luck. He also blows things up. He's big. He's a gas giant, right? Full of gas, full of hot air. So he's also our beliefs and ideologies. But we do see Jupiter transit expanding things, right? Expansion. That's one of the words that gets associated with Jupiter now, expansion, but also inclusion, being inclusive. Anyway, so what do retrogrades do? They bring reversals in fortune, typically having to do with the things that the planet rules. So some of that stuff I talked about, right? Good things can get worse, but then bad things can get better. So, you know, it's relative, isn't it? Now, retrogrades also delay things, slows them down, can also indicate unfinished business or having to backtrack to readdress things that may have been left undone. Now, what about Jupiter retrograde in particular? It's so funny because Jupiter's in Taurus right now, yes. And when I think of Jupiter in Taurus, my first thought is the Merrill Lynch statue in, or sculpture, whatever the fuck it is, in New York. You know, the big bull, right? The bull is Taurus. Anyway, we could talk about all the different corporations that have used astrological symbolism in their logos, but that's a topic for another day. But suffice it to say, when I think of Jupiter and Taurus, I think of the Merrill Lynch statue with the big bull balls, right? You should Google a picture. I'm not going to show one right here because it's got big bull balls. And then when I think of Jupiter retrograde in Taurus, I think of those big bull balls sort of shrinking up into his body as the weather gets colder through the fall. I mean, Jupiter doesn't go direct until New Year's Eve. A lot of us will have snow, won't we? Hopefully, if there's not too much wild climate change nonsense. Anyway, you see, Jupiter in Taurus often brings abundance. But Jupiter retrograde in Taurus can cramp all that for a bit. So in my experience, Jupiter retrograde can force us to face things, oftentimes for our own good. Sometimes we've avoided realities or responsibilities that we need to take on and address. Sometimes we've been a bit too optimistic about things, and we need to rein in our tendencies and behavior and some of our overly optimistic ideas. Sometimes it indicates needing to be cautious, needing to rein in our spending or licentiousness. For example, an example of from my own life, for example, from my own life, I came out as trans to my job and actively started transitioning when Jupiter went retrograde and back into Aquarius, my first house, in June of 2021. So you see, that was very indicative of the first house, though, addressing questions of identity that were left hanging. Now, what else can we see here? The impulse towards a new spiritual path, right? We question our beliefs. We discover new ones. We look at new philosophies. Sometimes we depart from old ones, old beliefs that were imposed on us by parents or tradition or whatever. A good example of this in my life is literally the day I joined the spiritual group I've been in for 17 years was when Jupiter went retrograde. In fact, I discovered that group just after Jupiter had gone retrograde in 2005, right? And started working on things actively when Jupiter went direct in 2005. So anyway, so you can see this pull towards spirituality and stuff like that. But then there's another bad side to it, right? There's the consequences of our beliefs. And a good example I picked of this, well, not a great example, but during the last Jupiter retrograde last year, 2022, 13 months ago, Alex Jones, the famous conspiracy whatever person, was ordered to pay restitution to the Sandy Hook families. Now, for those of you who don't remember, Sandy Hook was a mass shooting that was, it was just so awful. And many of the parents following that event were harassed by Alex Jones's viewers and listeners because he was saying things like it was a false flag, it was whatever, fake, and all this other sort of stuff. And it was such an awful thing. Even one of the parents, I don't know if I could say this, but unalived themselves because of all the harassment. So the Jupiter retrograde then revealed the consequences of those stupid assertions, right? And he was forced to pay restitution. So I think that's a good example of, the consequences of our beliefs. Now, what else happens is Jupiter backtracking could lead to revelations. One from my life was when an old partner, her motives were revealed. I won't go super into that, but we can see hidden motives come to light, right? Hidden problems within a system or project become apparent. And then people with mercenary motives who are out working against you, draining you of resources or defaming you, can reveal themselves or expose themselves, right? And then it's like, you know what? Now I know. remember the old phrase? It goes, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. What did George W. Bush say? I don't know. I'm never getting fooled again. So, and an example of this, exposing selfish motives or corruption. The last time Jupiter was retrograde was when the FBI raided Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, right? In regard to a lot of the things that are happening now. So you see, the Jupiter retrograde thing exposes a lot of these ill intentions. But what else happens? Well, Jupiter makes things bigger, right? Well, retrogrades can constrict them or arrest them or keep them from metastasizing, right? Keep them from going out of control. An example of this is the Inflation Reduction Act, which was also passed last Jupiter retrograde last year, right? And what did that do? That helped to slow down this, right? This expansion of prices, a lot of which has been driven by corporate greed. And Jupiter does have to do with greed. So Jupiter going retrograde can sort of put a damper on that, right? Now, what did this legislation do? It included some of the biggest efforts to fight climate change ever, which aren't a lot, but still the biggest. So again, this is sort of trying to mitigate or constrict a Jupiterian expansion or going out of control of the climate crisis. It also funded Obamacare until 2025. And I get my insurance as a small businesswoman, from the exchange. So That's helpful for me. Anyway, so Jupiter will be retrograde in the 6th house of the United States, which is what? Enemies, injuries, and illnesses. And we face a possible government shutdown while Jupiter is retrograde at the end of September, early October. I'm doing a separate video about financial stuff. But anyway, I just think it's important to point out that Jupiter was retrograde during the 1929 stock market crash that led to the Great Depression. And Jupiter has been in Taurus during 4 large financial crises in U.S. history. Number 1, the Panic of 1857. Number 2, the Panic of 1893. 3, the dot-com bubble that burst in the early 2000s, which some of you may not remember. And then the COVID crash of 2020, which hopefully you do remember. But what does this mean for you? Well, we talked about revelation. We talked about contraction, right? Or constriction. You know, keeping Jupiter from expanding too much. It's sort of like a belt, right? Or like a corset. A corset. Retrograde is like a corset for Jupiter. We also talked about reconsidering our beliefs, discovering new spiritual values or ideologies. This includes politics and worldviews. But also reversals in fortune and having to readdress things. So the nature of how these manifests for you in particular will be indicated by the house Jupiter is transiting for you, but also the houses he rules for you. And remember, I do whole sign houses. And we're about to look at your horoscopes, aren't we? Your horoscopes. So when we look at these, we're looking at the whole sign houses. Now, remember, I do these for each of the rising signs, but if you don't know your birth time, and hence your rising sign, you can look at this for your sun sign. So it won't be as useful. But anyway, let's talk about Aries Rising first. Oh, wait, I've got the fun little chart here. So, okay. So let's move forward an hour. So anyway, so Aries Rising. This means Jupiter's in your 2nd house and rules your 9th and your 12th. So this year's all about financial stability, right? Starting to get your finances in order, your livelihood, your business, if that's your thing. But during the retrograde for a couple months, it will feel like your finances are strained. This, well, it could be any number of things, right? It could be travel, it could be doctor's appointments, who knows? But the financial strain will help you conserve better and plan better. I had a client earlier who was in Aries Rising, and we talked about budgeting. Now, this will be true for also Libra Rising, because the 2nd and 8th house axis has a lot to do with finances. And we'll see this again when we get to Libra. But learning how to manage your funds, learning how to conserve and plan, that's going to be a key lesson here. So it won't be comfortable probably looking at your bank account for a couple months, but it will get better. Well, now how about Taurus Rising? For Taurus Rising, Jupiter's in your 1st house now and rules what? Your 8th and your 11th. So this year's about working on your confidence and working on yourself. But retrograde could lead to a few months of what? Introspection, self-doubt, reevaluation. This will likely help address things that you haven't been confident about or comfortable with. Maybe you're self-conscious about some things that have been bugging you. Maybe you're shy. I don't know. But this will likely help you address some of those things that you're not proud about or self-conscious about. There may be a sense, you may even change your appearance. That often happens with the 1st house transit. There may be some fear or trauma around these issues that are rearing their heads. And you may find that friends helping you is very supportive during this vulnerable period. They may give you confidence. They may give you reassurance. They may pump you up. But let's talk about our Gemini Rising friends. So for Gemini Rising, this is Jupiter in your 12th house, ruling your 7th and 10th. But this year, with Jupiter going through your 12th house, is about crawling into your cocoon, about healing and reflection. But these couple of months during retrograde could throw you out of whack because it throws you back into the world, right? It forces you out of your cocoon for a little bit. Which can make you quite exhausted and anxious, right? Having to deal with people again. But it helps us see the patterns that we don't see before. So as we go back into our cocoon, we're a little bit wiser and clearer on what we need to address. Now, these could have been issues from relationships, or perhaps feeling dissatisfied with your life direction, being the 10th house ruler as well. But let's move on to Cancer Rising. So for our Cancer Rising friends, this means Jupiter's in the 11th house and rules your 6th and your 9th. So what does that mean? Well, this year is all about hope and getting help from friends or benefactors with your goals. But the next few months here could be, well, they could make you cynical and pessimistic about your situation. It may feel like no one cares. No one cares. No one helps. But this can also help you recognize when to ask for help. Because people aren't mind readers. You do have to ask. So now this could have been stemming from disagreements with friends, right? It could have upset you or made you feel like you need to find a new circle. Or maybe your worldview just changed and you need to find a new circle that suits your new worldview or your new beliefs. Anyway, well, let's move on to Leo Rising. So our Leo Rising friends, this puts Jupiter in your 10th house. Lovely. Ruling your 5th. Wonderful. And your 8th. A little bit more difficult. But this year is all about success, praxis, action, and your life direction. But the next few months could bring delays in all that. Delays in success and making you feel like you don't have any direction. Maybe it feels like you don't get the job you want or you miss an opportunity. These sorts of things can be quite frustrating. They can also lead to new opportunities and alternate paths later. Sometimes what we thought we wanted ends up not really being what we wanted. Excuse me. I mean, some of the new opportunities can be promotions or career changes. Perhaps your children or a pregnancy has interfered with your work in some way. Or maybe it's been your own fear. Maybe it's been your own reluctance to step outside your comfort zone because you're too scared. Perhaps there was a public exposure of very private things that hurt your reputation. But my caution here is to watch out for office romances because they could hurt your reputation or opportunities. So just be careful. Now let's go to our Virgo Rising friends. Oops, went too far. Virgo Rising puts Jupiter in your 9th house, ruling your 4th and your 7th. So this year is about what you believe. New spiritual values, philosophical understandings, asking the big questions, perhaps studying and learning new things, or big journeys, a big trip, foreign cultures. But anyway, for the next few months during retrograde, you could be struggling with old belief systems. You may have gotten crystallized in those beliefs. Maybe they were imposed on you from parents or tradition, or just whatever you did for a long time. You're likely attached to them, but they will start to feel heavy, and you'll eventually find distance from them. This is important because ultimately everything we believe is wrong, right? We approximate reality, don't we? And the spiritual search is all about seeing things as they are. Again, we always are just approaching truth. I don't think we actually ever get there. But who knows? I guess we'll see. Or maybe we won't. Now, you may be fighting against old legacy beliefs, right? From your family, or they could have been from a spouse or a partner that imposed them on you. So, but what does this mean for our Libra rising friends? Libra. Well, that puts Jupiter in your 8th house, ruling your 3rd and your 6th. 3rd and 6th. So this year is all about clearing up your finances too, like we talked about with Aries. But this is more about paying things off. Whereas the Aries thing is more about what you earn in managing your resources. This is about paying off debt, about investments, and about planning for the future as well. So retrograde can bring temporary losses. They could be from the devaluation of investments or a big expenditure you didn't count on. You know, like a car breaks down or your air conditioning breaks or your heater or something, but it's something you have to spend a good amount of money on. Usually unexpected. And the losses, though, they can prompt us to get more financially organized, right? To budget, to be more responsible. Alternatively, maybe an extended family member owes you money, or you owe them. Or you could be having medical expenses that are coming down, causing you anxiety. Okay? But being responsible with finances is a big key here. Now, what about Scorpio Rising, friends? So this puts Jupiter in your 7th house, ruling your 2nd and your 5th. This year's about harmonizing relationships, which the 7th house is about, right? Also feeling a pull towards having a partner. But Jupiter retrograde could delay meeting someone. People could flake on us, could cancel on us. Or we could feel like everyone we meet isn't good enough or just not what we're looking for. Sometimes we feel like we're never going to meet anyone at all. This is important for us to get our priorities in order, though. To figure out what we really want and what we're willing to tolerate. We learn not to waste our time on people we're just lukewarm about. Perhaps you're working out money issues or child custody issues with the current partner or ex-partner. But you will likely want to meet someone fun and romantic. Or you meet someone that already has their own children, or whatever. Because the 5th house is children. But let's move on to Sagittarius Rising. This puts Jupiter in your 6th house, ruling your 1st and your 4th. This means this year is all about what? Improving your health, being consistent, and following through on your commitments and responsibilities. But for a few months, everything could feel chaotic. Maybe you have flare-ups or setbacks in your health. Maybe you can't find a doctor, or issues arise from a family pet. The perceived chaos, though, and feeling overwhelmed could really push you to start making lists, right? To get yourself organized and to incrementally take care of your responsibilities. One step at a time. You could also start a health routine like exercise or nutrition. You could also have a sick or injured parent or conflicts with a parent. And either one of these scenarios could force you to take on new responsibilities or commitments. So just be aware of that. Let's go to Capricorn Rising, friends. This means Jupiter's now in your 5th house. Your 5th house. She's a 5th house. Sorry. That's brick house, but 5th house. And ruling your 12th, right? And your 3rd. So this year is all about having fun. And having children. I'm half joking. Or am I? You may already have children, right? But they could have luck of their own. Or your relationship with them could improve. Retrograde, though, will bring some heaviness around these areas. So maybe you're unable to find leisure time. Maybe your kids have a bunch of shit going on, like, you know, there's soccer practice and ballet and gymnastics and after school and all kinds of projects and homework. A parent's job never ends. I have a 10-year-old. So, well, anyway, you could be feeling the strain of multiple activities that you have to do. This frustration, though, will make you more aware of the need for fun, of the need for leisure and taking care of yourself. For pleasure, maybe you need to lock yourself at the bathroom with a toy. I know I do quite frequently. You may want to have fun by yourself or in isolation. Or you could enjoy fun in media, news, or learning something new. I always think of content creation coming out of the third house too. But maybe you go on short journeys or take a staycation, right? That's always fun. Just hanging out around here, hanging out around the home, or getting a local hotel room, shoot, you know? Anyway, let's move on to Aqua Rising. This is me, all my Aqua Rising friends. So this puts Jupiter in our 4th house, ruling our 11th house and our 2nd. So this year is all about abundance with our home situation and our parents, right? Excuse me. Which, I mean, we could see a new apartment, we could see home updates, you know, find a new home, a health situation with a parent improves, or their own situation improves. Oftentimes, it's just building our own space and making it our own. Sometimes we work from home, you know, or organize that home space. But for the next few months, we could see strained relationships with parents, and we could feel discouraged about our living situation. Maybe rent goes up. Maybe there's more fees or more bills, right? However, this helps us decide what we really want and what's really worth it to us. Oftentimes we have to decide whether dealing with a parent is really worth our mental health. So I know that happened to me. So, but also alternatively, you may find a new living situation. You know, you may find a new apartment or new home, or you could sell a home. You could find living opportunities through friends. You could find roommates if you've been having trouble paying for your place, right? For me, it's learning that home is where you make it, right? I moved into a totally different situation, a totally different state. And I know that this is feeling like home now. You know, this is my home. It feels like home. When I went to visit my old state, it felt like I was visiting. It didn't feel like home, right? Anyway, you could also, like, I think I already said this, you could start working from home. If you have a home business, you could see that improve a bit. Anyway, what about our Pisces Rising friends? Pisces Rising. So this puts Jupiter in your 3rd house, ruling your what? Your 10th and your 1st. And this year's all about focusing your attention, right? Could have to do with something like learning or teaching, or a writing or speaking project, communication, or perhaps your immediate community or extended family. For the next few months, though, it could feel like family causes you extra stress or anxiety, or that you can't keep your attention on anything. You may have a project or a long-term goal that suddenly feels tedious or delayed. Maybe it's school or classes of some sort. I don't know. 3rd house. There could also be discord in your community, like a series of robberies, or like a need for a neighborhood watch, or a water main break, or some sort of construction that makes a bunch of traffic in your community. I know I used to live near a fairgrounds area, and whenever they had events, it would just make my whole area just a mess. So that could be something for you. Excuse me. But this could be good to narrow your focus, because you'll likely feel scattered and you need to narrow your focus to a couple of things. You may have a long-term work project or training, like work training, learning stuff that you've been working on. Or you may need to work on your resume because other opportunities are emerging, or you need to work on self-promotion. And what is a resume but just self-promotion? Look what I can do, right? Anyway, I hope this was useful. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. I'm in a terrible mood because, 7th house things, Venus in relationship bullshit. But I do wonderful readings. They're the best. It's scientifically proven. All my information is below to contact me. Follow me on all the other social media platforms. And remember, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a wonderful whatever the heck you're having,